Hello everyone, I'm Alberto Basaglia, a postdoctoral scholar at the University di D'Annunzio of Chieti Pescara, and I'm happy to present at the 2021 SAHC conference our recent work on a QGIS plugin for the seismic vulnerability assessment of urban centers, application to the city of Popoli in Abruzzo, Italy. Before I start, I would like to thank my co-authors from my same university, Dr. Alexander Gonzalez, Professor Enrico Spaccone, and Professor Giuseppe Brand. In my presentation, I will cover the motivation of our work, as well as the methodology adopted and obtained results. Then I will discuss main findings and conclude with some suggestions for future works. The motivation of our work stems from the high toll that major earthquakes in particular caused in the last 2 decades globally, making it one of the most concerning disasters. Yet, to understand earthquakes and their effects, it is important to have adequate knowledge on the seismic risk and its 3 components, which are the hazard. It is the probability of occurrence and intensity of earthquake, so it's area dependent, and the exposure, which contains all elements at risk, so that human lives, economic activities, and cultural heritage. And finally, the vulnerability, which is the predisposition of an element, so a building or an infrastructure, to undergo damage. And vulnerability, of course, may be reduced with mitigation strategies. Yet, understanding seismic risk is not the most important aspects, as well as issues may arise when communicating risk. In fact, information sender that are always or oftentimes academia and industry experts may have a strong scientific background, but their focus is on understanding risk, and most importantly, they have no rush. While on the opposite side, information receivers, so local central government, stakeholders, and grassroots organizations who want to gain knowledge on risk may not have a scientific background, and most importantly, they need quick and easy solutions. So to enable the exchange of information between these actors, the use of maps have been increasingly adopted as they can easily communicate risk and can serve as the base to plan preventive strategies. Among all possible ways to produce maps, Quantum GIS or QGIS is a geographical information system software that is widely used. For this reason, we decided to adopt it as well and develop a plugin that produces seismic vulnerability and loss maps. And if you ask why QGIS, because it is free, so it can be easily accessible by everyone. It is open source, so fully customizable using the Python interface, and it has a strong community support. So it is continually developed to have always new features. QGIS uses shapefiles or vector file formats, including all buildings information, so their location and their attributes, that may be the structure type, the number of stories, and so on. These shapefiles can be downloaded from multiple sources, such as OpenStreetMap, that is open source as well, or created manually. So at first, the developed plugin, we decided to include section to evaluate the seismic input for each building, provided that an earthquake magnitude and an epicenter are given. Then the plugin uses a ground motion prediction equation to calculate the intensity from the epicenter to the location of each building. A GMPE is included in the plugin, but it can be updated by the user if needed. With the seismic input for each building, the plugin evaluates the vulnerability and expected damage, provided that the method to calculate this is given. And currently, the plugin includes a vulnerability index method for our reinforced masonry buildings and a suite of rigidity curves for reinforced concrete buildings. The first method uses the characteristic of our reinforced masonry buildings to come up with an index that is then used to evaluate the damage and the probability of damage using empirical approaches. Then fragility curves are curves associating the intensity of an earthquake, usually the peak ground acceleration, to the probability of exceeding a certain damage level. Fragility curves may be derived using direct approaches that model the structure and numerically determine their seismic response, or with empirical approaches as well. The main issue is, the most important thing is that approaches used for reinforced masonry buildings and reinforced concrete buildings, they have to be based on the same damage classification. And in this case, the probability index method and the fragility curve, they are both based on the European microseismic scale that classifies a damage using 6 levels from D0, no damage, to D5, complete collapse. Then, with the vulnerability and damage determined, the plugin calculates also the losses in terms of casualties, so deaths and injured, and in the terms of economic losses, so with repair and replacement costs. And for both the casualties and repair costs, values available in the literature have been adopted. To show the potentiality of the developed plugin, we decided to apply it to a case study. The city of Popoli in the Abruzzo region was chosen as case study because even if it has a small size, it has, I think, approximately 5,000 people. It has a K-12 school system, so from kindergarten to high school. It is crossed by a river, so it has many bridges connecting the 2 sides of the town. It has a hospital, a public hospital, and 2 main commercial areas. All these features making it a suitable case study. So here you can see the first part of the plugin, so the window for determining the seismic input. You can see the earthquake epicenter set close to Paganica and the magnitude as 6.3. And you can see also the city of Popoli that is quite distant from the earthquake epicenter. The epicenter and the magnitude are the same of the 2009 L'Aquila earthquake. Here you can see the window of the plugin that determines the vulnerability and uses a color scale ranging from light green for the least vulnerable to red for the most vulnerable buildings. Here you can see the window that the plugin has determined the losses in terms of casualties using a gray scale, so from white buildings with no casualty and up to black with buildings with the highest number of casualties. And here you can see the last window for the economic losses, again with a color scale ranging from green with the lowest economic losses with up to red with the highest economic losses. So to discuss main findings, we saw that the use of maps it significantly helps when communicating risks, as it enables to easily identify areas most prone to damage. And these areas will be the first where mitigation strategies will be put in place. And limitation of this approach, of course, are the need of users' input, especially in terms of hazard and vulnerability definition, and the lack of a graphical user interface, making the plugin a bit difficult to use for people without a background on software or on programming. So in conclusion, we develop a QGIS plugin to produce vulnerability and loss assessments at the large scale. The developed plugin is fully customizable through its Python interface to fit the user's need, and the potentiality of the plugin have been showed through the application on a real case study in Central Italy, and future works will aim to expand the functionality of the plugin, for example, by linking it to existing database of hazard vulnerability or exposure, and by creating a graphical user interface to make it more user-friendly. Here you can see listed the main references adopted in this study. And with that, I thank you for your attention. If you have any comments or questions, I highly encourage you to reach out via email. And with that, goodbye and enjoy the rest of the conference.